Hello, my friends. Thanks for joining us once again for our program Spiritism, a closer look right here on Kardec Radio. And once again, I always say this we do this every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. So thanks for being with us on this program. And on this program, we're going to take a closer look at death and discarnation. They're not the same thing. For some people, it might be the same thing. For other people, it might be similar, but not exactly the same. And for other people, are two completely different concepts. So I'm going to start by, we're going to analyze this in details. So I'm going to start saying that the word, let's consider the words first. The word death is a word that comes from science in principle and common language. So if we go out there, we're talking to somebody, we hardly ever would say that somebody discarnate, unless you are part of a spirituality or spiritualism group or spiritism group in which we use the word. But common language is, we use the word death. And like I said, it's something supported. It's a word that is supported by science. Discarnation is a little bit different. Discarnation is the separation of the spirit from the physical body. And it does not, this separation of the spirit from the physical body does not fit the materialistic paradigm. So the word discarnation does not exist in such a context. That's why we use two different words for two different, similar but different things. So we're going to get to the bottom of this and see exactly where the difference is, the criteria used by each one to define the words. So I'm going to start with the word death. If you go to, for example, the Medline Plus, which is part of the Merriam-Webster dictionary online, it is the most widely used dictionary, online dictionary for definition of terms. So if you go there and you type the word death, meaning we're looking for the definition of death from the dictionary, Medline Plus, we will get something very similar to this. It's the irreversible, important, irreversible cessation, irreversible cessation of all vital functions, especially as indicated by permanent stoppage of the heart, respiration, and brain activity. And then the definition continues, it says, it is the end of life. Well, when you define death, as I just read to you, and at the end you say, the end of life, now I want the definition of life. Right? So on the same dictionary, on the same platform, if we type the word life to get its definition, the definition that shows up is the quality that distinguishes a vital and functional part. I'm sorry. I'm going to say that again. The quality that distinguishes a vital and functional plant or animal from a dead body. Oh, that's kind of very vague. It's like in the air. It didn't really define anything else, and it still used the word death to define. So science has a tremendous, I'm going to use this expression, hard time to define life. And why is that? The reason is because life and death are parts of the same sequence of events. So science, it cannot define life because it's something immaterial. a body is material, but life is a body that is animated. I'm going to use this word, animated by something else. That something else is whatever you want to call. For now, it doesn't really matter. Soul, spirit, intelligent principle. That is life. So the impossibility to define life properly from the materialistic paradigm comes from the impossibility to define death. They cannot be separated. They are part of the same sequence of events. One interesting take that I'm going to bring over to you is there's a book called The Quantum Self. This book was written by Dr. Dana Zohar. She, in her younger days, she was studying medicine and science, and she had this idea to start writing, simple and small articles relating superficially science and spirituality. So this thing, started to take form, a more serious approach as she was going along in her career, and she became this bold voice on science and spirituality. And she wrote a book called, the book that I told you the name now, The Quantum Self. In this book, there's one phrase that is very interesting, and it fits perfectly in our subject here. The phrase is, at the subatomical level of elementary particles, there is no death in the sense of a permanent loss. Well, let's think about this a little bit. Death, from the concept of a scientific concept or the common language approach, is a permanent loss. We lost a loved one. We lost something. So it brings this general idea of a permanent loss. What she's saying, and from the same scientific point of view, is if you look at the subatomic levels of all the elementary particles that were part of that body that just died, there is no death. There is only transformation. So the atoms and the molecules that were part of that body that died did not die. They just recombined. The atoms just recombined with other atoms to form other things. So there is no death in the sense of a permanent loss. This is very interesting because it's coming from the scientific side of studies about life and death. So if we go back in time, trying to understand the evolution of the concept of death, still within the materialistic paradigm, we haven't got to Spiritism yet. If we go back to, let's say, the caveman time, thousands of years ago, well, when would we consider that somebody died? Well, perhaps, somebody fell on the floor. Now the body doesn't move for an hour, 2 hours, the body doesn't move for 3 days. Then, oh yeah, this person is died. There is no coming back. That person is done. So the inability to show mobility in the body defines death thousands of years ago. When you start, coming closer to our times in history, we understand that there's something called heart, the physical heart inside the chest. And there's a good way to check if a person is dead or not. So let's say the person is laying on the floor, apparently not moving. So if we put our ear right on the chest of that person, we could hear, for example, a heartbeat. So the person is still alive for all purposes, although the body is not moving. For example, a person who is sleeping, the body is not moving, but there's a clear heartbeat. So if you put your ear, again, just thousands of years ago, if you put your ear on somebody's chest and you don't hear anything and the body doesn't move, that is a good moment to declare death. way in the past. Now, the problem is, for you to say this, it depends on the ability, the ear on the person who is checking. I can put my ear on somebody's chest and say, I don't hear anything at all. Then the next person comes up, put their ear on the same chest of the same person, and it will say, no, I still hear something. Really light, but I still hear it. So you can't use this as a parameter to define death. And then we go, further down in time, we create something called the stethoscope, which now still the same process. It's about hearing the heartbeat, but it's much more precise, because now I'm not using my ear on somebody's chest with a bunch of loud noises around. No, it's very specific. I'm gonna hear the heartbeat into my ears clearly or not. So the stethoscope changes things a little bit, but still it depends on the ability of the person who is doing the hearing. I can put a stethoscope and say, yeah, I hear something very, 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 almost nothing. Somebody else comes in and says, I don't hear anything. Still, it's a difficult criteria to establish death. And then we go into the electrocardiogram, in which now it's no longer the ears, but it's drawings on a or a line variations on a piece of paper. That's more precise. And then we go in and finds that the heart could have stopped, but the person is still not dead because the brain is still working. So we go to the next level. We invented the electroencephalogram, EEG, in which we're going to measure the waves there are or not in the brain. So the brain generates waves that can be detected. And finally, we get to, which is the current criteria for death, encephalic death, or some people call brain death. So encephalic death, when that doesn't show any signs of activity, done. That's it. That is the criteria that we use to produce death certificates, for example. Now, there's a tremendous challenge here and a problem. Somebody's on a surgery room being operated on, whatever it is. Then, of course, you have all the equipment and the medical team, nurses and doctors, and so they're watching the equipment, monitoring vital signs and all of that on the person who is being operated on, and suddenly everything stops. Everything stops. They try to, revive. That's the word, the common word used for it. So we try to revive that person. Nothing doesn't do it. So the person is declared death because supposedly there was an encephalic death. So that's it. End of the story. Everything flatlines. The problem is, a lot of people, a few minutes later, maybe an hour later, they will come back to life. Not only that, it becomes more challenging. They will come back. They will, recover fully, and they will tell the doctors and nurses, I saw this and this and this happening in the operating room. The doctor said this, the nurse responded like that. You walk to the left, you walk to the right. And the medical team, they look at each other and they say, wow, that was really what happened. This is called near-death experience. So near-death experience opens this hole to define death from the materialistic point of view. It really complicates things for those studying the subject under that paradigm. That's death. Now, for Spiritism, we do not use the word death in general because it is considered something punctual. You could be alive now in 1 nanosecond or even a picosecond, which is a thousandth of a nano, in the next picosecond, you're not, because now the brain is dead. So death points to something very punctual, and it's not, because dying, as we know it, it's a process. So we cannot use in Spiritism the word death. We use discarnation. And Spiritism teaches exactly that. Death is not an end, it's a transformation. So something else is going to happen. It's going to take time for the process to take form. So it all starts, the process starts when the spirit is getting ready to disconnect from the physical body. That's the start of discarnation. The process ends when the spirit fully disconnects from the physical body. Now, from the scientific point of view, we cannot measure or pinpoint that, because we don't have equipment, medical equipment, that can tell us, oh, the spirit is now starting to disconnect. And there's a point where it shows on a screen, for example, oh, the spirit fully disconnected. We don't have that. Remember, the criteria for death in science is not the same as in Spiritism. Spirituality is different. And because we don't have this equipment that can tell us that, it's hard to tell if the spirit is still attached. So cases where people are in the hospital beds, in vegetation state, it's very hard to say. It's actually impossible to say there's a spirit still attached to that body or not, because we cannot measure with equipment that can tell us that. Maybe one day we'll get close to that point, but not yet. Not yet. So discarnation is a process. It could be a very fast process, a very easy in and out sort of thing process, or it could be long. It could involve a lot of suffering. So when, how can we tell if one or the other is going to be the case for each one of us? Well, a few things here. The quality of the detachment from the body depends on a few things. For example, the individual's moral state or spiritual state. Those who are have higher moral standards will have an easier transformation, right? An easier process. Those who are more spiritually advanced are going to have a less complicated passage than those who are not so advanced spiritually. It also depends on how the individual lived their life that they're leaving behind. If if we live this life full of glorious, beautiful, virtuous things, we do a lot of fraternity, charity, we do, good things, good deeds all across, that's a good chance that the process is going to be not so bad. Now, if we live, doing evil things, selfishness, pride, all of those things, it's going to be a complicated process. And another thing that we can say that it impacts the quality of the detachment is how detached the individual is from material things. Those who are very attached to material things, when their time is coming, they don't want to let go. So they will fight with all their uh, uh, last drops of strength, if you will, to keep themselves in the material world because they want the physicality of things because of their level of detachment. Those who are not so attached to material things, they have a much more, I would say, a smooth passage or transition. Now, when the process finishes, meaning discarnation is complete, the spirit, no longer we can say person because there is no physical body, so the spirit will now awaken on the other side of life. And that awakening depends on a few things as well. For example, the moral elevation of the person. If the morality that the individual or now spirit carries is very low, this spirit is going to be taken to environments where things are not so good, things are ugly, in line with other spirits who have also discarnated and carry the same overall morality. So it's going to be places that are awful, dark, where suffering reigns. Another thing that depends that the awakening of the soul on the other side depends is faith. Understanding how life beyond the grave works. Faith, which faith could be very complicated to define and live by those who subscribe to the materialistic paradigm, which, like we said, is going to make this discarnation process much more complicated. Now, the awakening on the other side can also depend on spiritual benefactors, or family members that will, take you into their arms, if you will, quotes please. So the Spiritism teaches exactly that. No one is abandoned. Every soul receives help during the transition, of course, according to their needs, according to their merits. But we are all entitled for that help. So for those who prepare themselves for discarnation, will have a less complicated process. And how can we be more prepared? First, cultivating love and forgiveness. Forgiveness is maybe the number one thing. Because if I have to, let's just say, for example, that 30 years ago, I had a fight with somebody. It could be a family member, a parent, a son, a daughter, it doesn't matter. A friend. If you had this thing and you are carrying these heavy weights in your soul for 30 years and you are not able to forgive, you're going to take that shackle in your soul with you to the other side. It's going to be much more complicated. So it's easier to resolve here before we leave this dimension. As we forgive people that we had problems with or circumstances with, it's only beneficial for us. If it's not beneficial for them, they have to work on that. They don't have nobody to have to respond to any of us about their morality. They respond to God. I cannot expect that anybody is going to report their moral standards to me. No, it's absurd. So cultivating forgiveness is the key. So we cross over without carrying shackles, without going to, places where environments where the body is heavy and we're going to be suffering all the time. Another thing that helps us prepare for discarnation is to detach from materialism, excessive materialism. Of course, we need material things because we're living a material life, but excessive materialism, it's something that we should not enforce at all. Another thing that helps us prepare for discarnation, service people, practice charity, practice service for those who need. As we go along, we accumulate experiences that makes us more prone to assist other people because we have more knowledge, more wisdom. And of course, faith is always something that matters in this case. So Spiritism teaches us clearly that death is not the end. It's only a change of state. It's time for renewal. It's time for renewal. Okay, here's a milestone. I did this. I crossed over. Now let's do a better life. And it is the same way for our loved ones who have crossed before we did. You see, our loved ones continue to live their now spiritual life. They continue to think. They continue to love. They are often with us in our daily tasks, a lot of times. So, for us to be in line with their love and the good things that they did for us, that they left behind, we could pray for them, elevate our thoughts, invest in time and energy in a better moral conduct. All of these things elevate us so we can be in good vibration of love and peace with them, those who already left us. So again, to wrap up, death is not a tragedy. It is renewal. It's a doorway to a higher life. Discarnation is not death. It's not the same. We spoke about this in the beginning. Discarnation is the spirit liberation from matter, which, by the way, allows the spirit to continue evolving towards perfection. Nothing stops. As a discarnate spirit, the spirit will continue to evolve, and you will come back for another life, being in a stage that's more advanced than before. One of our recent talks was about the third age and how we get to third age, more prepared for discarnation and all of that. I encourage you to look for that and listen to that. It's called Third Age. Also right here on Spiritism, a closer look on Kardec Radio. Well, thank you very much for being with us once again on this program. And don't forget, Spiritism, a closer look is here on Kardec Radio every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Thank you so much, and please join us.